Thank you. And could I have the members of the first panel come up, please? And I'll introduce right now, very briefly, as I did before, Tom Baione, my colleague at the American Museum of Natural History who runs their library. So Tom, if you would come up, and then the other two speakers as well, Polina and Michelle. Thank you.
Good morning, and thanks. Michelle and Polina, I should warn you that I'm going to follow Paul's lead in dispensing with reading the bios on the website. So thanks for sharing them with me. We're going to tackle the first question of the day. What new roles are historical medical libraries taking up in today's world? Michelle DiMeo is Vice President of Collections and Programs at the Arnold Thackeray and the Arnold Thackeray Director of the Othmer Library at the Science History Institute in Philadelphia. Polina Ilieva is the Associate University Librarian for Collections at the University of California, San Francisco's campus, is the UCSF Archivist and an Assistant Adjunct Professor with the Department of Humanities and Social Sciences at the University of California, San Francisco. Polina, I think you're up first.
How do I move the slides? Thank you, Tom. Good morning, everyone, and good afternoon. It's a pleasure to meet all of you here in person and virtually. So my presentation is based on the work I have been doing at UCSF and collaborating with many of you here. So the question we are addressing today, what new roles are historical medical libraries, or HMLs, taking on, is crucial for the survival of HMLs as institutions. Just 5 years ago, who could have predicted that so many industries will shift to remote work, or that AI will assist with analyzing medical data? We're still navigating the benefits and challenges of these human technological shifts and other profound changes. And the future is emerging as we speak, and I'm excited to explore these questions with you. I would like to quote the UCSF Chancellor Sam Hagwood from his 2023 State of the University address. With the confluence of human and artificial intelligence, it's hard not to feel we are at the edge of a new era in human history. How can HMLs lead in that era? What are HMLs? Keepers of knowledge, access facilitators, stewards of data? Take a look at the stunning center spread with its eye-catching photographs and masterful design. What is your immediate reaction? Twice a year, our university publishes this beautiful magazine, online and in print, highlighting scientific breakthroughs, new discoveries, and new researchers. In July, I opened the summer issue to find this treasure chest feature, showcasing several historical items from our collection. While I was excited to see our holdings featured, I recognized the recurring theme. These treasures are often seen as hidden gems rather than actionable resources. They are usually relegated to admiration for their beauty and historical connection rather than being actively integrated into research. People outside of our field believe that the role of places like ours, of historical medical libraries and archives, is to store, preserve, and display these treasures. While I do agree that our role is to preserve history, keeping it alive and connected to the present. However, this example highlights missed opportunities to demonstrate how research into the past can build bridges to future breakthroughs. And I am inviting all of us to think bigger. How can we turn the HML sector flywheel from being seen as passive to actionable, change from being viewed as static to dynamic, and move from late adopters to innovators? I see our role is making the past AR ready. At HMLs around the country and worldwide, we now hold tens of millions of pages of digitized materials, including manuscript, journals, AV items, 3D objects, and so on. However, the proliferation of numerous small and often unsustainable digital portals has created barriers requiring our users to search extensively for dispersed materials. These materials are also scattered across bigger portals, such as Internet Archive, Calisphere, Europeana, to name just a few. In the past, librarians and archivists provided guidance on how to identify relevant materials in these repositories. I envision a future where AI versions of us can be programmed to guide our users. I see the future role for HMLs in developing AI-enabled infrastructure that will make digital libraries more intuitive and human-centered, helping users make sense of the millions of documents they encounter. Our role should include extracting data from digitized content and creating open access data sets whenever possible. I believe we cannot leave this crucial task to others, including tech companies, who may not prioritize user needs and may lack ethical standards upheld by library and archival professionals. Many of you here are already familiar with the collections or archives as data approach that refers to archival collection materials in digital form that can be shared, accessed, analyzed, and referenced as data. We have begun advancing archives as data framework with support from IMLS and NIH funding. One of the examples is creating No More Silence project dataset. It includes a significant subset of materials from UCSF AIDS History Project, drawn from 19 digitized collections and representing files that have been compiled, prepared, and made available as a dataset. The dataset is open for research, providing direct computational access to historical documentation of the San Francisco Bay Area response to the AIDS epidemic. This was our first experience, and one of the main takeaways is the challenges related to MPLP, more product, less process, archival practices, and the rapid digitization pace. Is that metadata was created at a folder level, complicating data exploration, which usually happens at the document level. We also recently launched Digital Health Humanities program to encourage research at the intersection of health sciences, data science, and digital humanities. It is an emerging field that leverages digital methods and tools to critically analyze historical health data and archival materials related to medicine and health. The UCSF Library is hosting a 2-year Digital Health Humanities Research Incubator. Funded by NIH, the Institute for Advanced Topics in Digital Health Humanities brings together a cross-disciplinary cohort of scholars and community organizers. And one of the Institute's goals is to develop Digital Health Humanities Toolkit, as well as a white paper examining crucial issues and topics in this domain, including ethical use of health-related archives as data and understanding bias and influence through archival health data in historical record. Almost all users take photos of our collections during visits, resulting in millions of pages stored on personal devices. We must find a way to harness this large-scale DIY crowd digitization and integrate these files into our repositories. Previous attempts to co-develop metadata with crowd participations were not fully successful due to the high level of staff mediation required and their unsustainable nature. Opportunities for collaboration exist in using AI to review and incorporate these digital files into digital collections maintained by HMLs. Merging these data points will help expand and enrich our collections through crowdsourced contributions. We are also focusing on historical patient data, exploring ways to enhance its accessibility and usability for research. All HMLs have medical records and already started digitizing them. But we have been partnering with many of you here on preparing and submitting grants, so far unsuccessful, to build a multi-institutional project to develop a scalable database and discovery tool that will constitute the foundation of the historical patient data portal. The goal of this project is to permit for the ethical research of historical personal health data in a HIPAA-compliant, secure environment while promoting its preservation. One of its primary outcomes is to advance the understanding of historical patient data utility in the health, social, behavioral, economic sciences, and policymaking. We plan to continue looking for funding for this project. And if you have any funding, please let me know. So we also leveraging institutional AR initiatives. UCSF developed a robust and secure generative artificial intelligence infrastructure platform, Versa. It constitutes of two products, Versa Chat and Versa API. The platform allows UCSF clinicians, administrators, and scientists to access large language models while keeping both the model prompts and the data inside UCSF in a secure enterprise cloud. Colleagues and I started experimenting with AI use cases for digital libraries and archives. Our role should be also pivoting from physical to born digital, which already has been discussed here. And you might wonder, why am I focusing on born digital materials and how are they relevant to historical medical libraries, which mostly hold physical and digitized collections? Many HMLs serve as repository for records from their anchor institutions, which, like most of the society, have increasingly transitioned to born digital. We're building infrastructure and tools for archiving born digital materials. In order to enhance capability and developing tools designed for archiving electronic materials to better manage and preserve born digital content. The most recent example for us is a COVID tracking project, CTP. Online platforms such as Slack and Google Apps were crucial for the daily operations of CTP, but these systems have never been archived for future research. Our team focused on building open source tools that are available on GitHub for the retrieval of data from hosted products and storing them in a format for future research that future researchers can access and understand. We must securely navigate the boundaries set up by HIPAA and other local and federal regulations for medical records to ensure compliance while managing and providing access to sensitive information. We aim to harness institutionally developed research tools used for de-identifying contemporary patient data and are launching a HIPAA-compliant virtual reading room to improve remote access to our digital collections. Our role is also moving from physician-centered collecting to community partnerships. While our historical collections may be rooted in the past, we are actively expanding our holdings in line with mandates from our institutions. We are also firmly focused on the future, actively collecting and preserving contemporary content. We are shifting toward co-designing archives in collaboration with patients and patient communities. It is crucial to document the experiences of all participants in healthcare. Many communities are sharing their challenges through social media platforms, such as Patient Like Me. Together with 5 community-based partner organizations, we have received a grant from the California State Library to co-create the Opioid Crisis Community Archive, OCCA. This archive, the first of its kind, will document the impact of the opioid crisis on communities in Northern California. And it builds on our experience working with communities through the AIDS History Project for more than 35 years. A key output of the OCCA project is the inclusion of the underrepresented voices in the historical record. The OCCA's process of community archival co-design will serve as an example that can be referenced or replicated by other community-based organizations and archives addressing public health crisis. Many of us are already focusing on advocacy and leadership with reparative and inclusive descriptive and cataloging initiatives. Reparative descriptions focus on remediating or contextualizing potentially outdated or harmful language used in descriptive practices, ensuring accuracy and inclusivity. Our role is moving from gatekeepers to third places anchoring humanities and art. Several repositories are already embracing this approach, opening their doors to new partners, including NIAM, to new partners, artists, and other researchers. The UCSF Artist in Residence program brings a humanities dimension to our health sciences campus through inspiring artists by historical materials in our collection. The artists create works that explore the connection between art and healing, examine scientific discovery processes, and address contemporary issues in healthcare and social justice. These new engagements, coupled with exhibits and lectures, help create so-called third spaces for socialization, in particular now that so many of our anchor institutions have moved to remote first or hybrid workplaces. To quote Tim Criswell, do we want HMLs to be fortresses turned on themselves in exclusionary ways, or be part of communities, welcoming connections to others who inhabit their neighborhoods and share their spaces, end quote. Our role is also integrating primary sources into curriculum. We aim to transition from isolated educational efforts to embedding archives into the medical curriculum and graduate programs in history of health sciences. During our Anatomy of Archives 11-week course, students develop competencies related to researching and describing archival collections, as well as interpreting the historical record. From passive users of archives, they become co-creators, acquiring invaluable expertise. We intend to actively engage medical students with historical materials, enhancing their understanding of the historical context and evolution of medical practices to expand their cultural competences. And we're already incorporating industry documents, library materials, when teaching pharmacy and medical students. Our role is also moving from silos to comprehensive suites. Our role is to be AR ready to embrace what Cornelia Wolfer recently defined as the fourth space, a space that brings together thinkers and doers. It arises when we dissolve silos that separate industry, academia, governments, and civil society and artists. It expands when we connect traditionally disconnected disciplines, end quote. So what should we do? Instead of dealing with a dispersed list of sites for accessing digital materials, we aim to create a streamlined workflow that enables researchers to seamlessly transition from identifying relevant records to using computational tools, including AI, to analyze data extracted and primed by HMLs, as well as committing to providing open access to this data. We are focusing on making our search engine smarter and more efficient, improving the ability to find, organize, reference, and examine digital materials. We are moving beyond building isolated websites. We are dedicated to creating an AI-powered infrastructure that supports and facilitates research across various digital domains. We will leverage our institutional resources and partner with other HMLs to develop and sustain that infrastructure, ensuring it meets the needs of researchers and enhances our overall research capabilities. So next steps, how can we move into the future with confidence? HMLs are typically not standalone institutions. The anchor university or research entity often defines their role. Their activities are guided by the strategic plans of these institutions, which sometimes limits HMLs to showcasing hidden treasures and consulting on institutional history. HMLs are often seen as costly due to expenses of maintaining climate-controlled and secure physical spaces within libraries or other institutional buildings. With many anchor institutions shifting to remote or virtual first approach, the physical vaults and reading rooms of HMLs continue to require on-site support and maintenance, which can make them seem outdated and underutilized. Librarians and archivists in HMLs are often disconnected from the current research activities in their anchor institutions. Many of our university or institutional colleagues may be unaware of our existence and the valuable data we hold. What should we do? Clearly articulate our evolving role and secure buy-ins from anchor institutions. We must build partnerships with researchers, educators, healthcare providers, community patients, and students to identify gaps that our historical collections can fill. We should highlight the benefits and significance of these new roles for target communities of researchers, clinicians, and educators, and the anchor institution as a whole, explaining how it aligns with and reinforces their mission. We should present successful proof-of-concept projects emphasizing impact for research, clinical and educational enterprise to ensure proper resource allocation. We should be developing strategies to sustain and expand our initiatives over the long term. We have each volunteered hundreds of hours on various professional projects, which must be operationalized to ensure their success. Promoting these new roles and advocating for financial support is crucial, as we all know that unfunded mandates rarely succeed. I want to conclude with a quote from Jim Collins, author of Good to Great, on his concept of turning the flywheel. The key to business success is not a single innovation or one plan. It is the act of turning the flywheel, slowly gaining momentum and eventually reaching a breakthrough. Over the past 15 years, HMLs have been working to build our own flywheel, in particular with mass digitization project and development of digital portals. With the initiatives I outlined, we are now accelerating this momentum. This conference will help us identify how to keep the flywheel turning amidst shifting institutional priorities, emerging technologies, and significant societal changes. This will enable us to fully open our thoughtfully preserved treasure chest, making them AR-ready, and empower researchers and learners as they embark on their own innovative journeys. Thank you.
Okay, hi, thank you. Thank you very much to the organizers for the invitation. Okay, so in being asked to talk about new roles, I decided to take on the AI question that's floating around today. There we go. Okay. In March of 2023, I received an email from a colleague who is active in the American Chemical Society's Division of Chemistry, known as ACS HIST. A professor of physical chemistry of nanomaterials in Germany had reached out to ACS HIST to access a paper given at the ACS Symposium of 1971. He had all the helpful details necessary for locating the item: the annual meeting title, the presenting author, and the panel title. My ACS HIST colleague, who is a chemistry lab director at a USR1, noted that her own university once had a set of the ACS meeting abstracts, but these had been moved to off-site storage, and she did not have time to locate the volume she needed. She wondered if we, the Othmer Library of Chemical History at the Science History Institute, still had a complete set. Of course we did, but searching through it that afternoon revealed a problem. This was a fake paper given by a fake author at a fake session. The citation used a real national meeting and the name of a real sponsoring division, but we were able to determine that the remaining information was falsely produced from the German professor's named source here, ChatGPT. The process by which artificial intelligence generates false information is called a hallucination. While computer scientists are working to improve their data models and reduce the possibility of generating hallucinations, most experts agree that some level of hallucination is inevitable with computer-generated creativity, their words. Most assume that a 3 to 5% error rate at present, but the latest data that I've found on the Public Hallucination Leadership Board hosted on GitHub suggests some recent improvements, and accuracy ratings are ranging from 95% to 98.7%. This was the first time that our library fact-checked a false AI reference, but it wasn't the last. I do not have reliable statistics, since most users do not cite their source as ChatGPT when they get in touch with us, like this patron did. But over the past year, we have received a handful of similar references to incorrect citations that we suspect are AI generations. We even spotted that an educational partner with whom we were collaborating on children's programming used an AI-generated painting of a 19th century female practitioner to advertise our event. In this case, our curator of fine art noticed what looked to her like an anachronistic gender depiction. She contacted the company to ask for the source, confirmed her suspicion that it was AI-generated, and then requested that they take it down and use one of our real paintings instead, which thankfully they did. Other likely evidence of the impact of AI on libraries might be harder to spot. Last year, for the first time in the 6-year history of our digital collections, we received a sharp increase in bots conducting bulk downloads of high-resolution images. Since AWS charges us for each download, we had to temporarily suspend our TIFF downloads while we explored the issue. In theory, we have no problem with users freely downloading our data, be they people or computers. But this unexpected spike surged over our budgetary threshold, and we had to make some quick decisions to reduce cost. So, what's a librarian to do? This technology is so new that it's impossible to predict the true impact on our field. Initial reactions might range from outright dismissal of AI technologies as unreliable to fear that the technology will get so good that it will put most humans, and especially librarians, out of work. In this presentation, I want to forge a pathway between these two extremes and offer some concrete thoughts on the current state of affairs. I am calling this the age of AI because I think it is distinctly different from the digital age, whereby our primary concern was digitize everything. However, taking a longer view allows us to use past examples of how libraries always leverage technological innovations to remain relevant. So before speaking about new roles specifically for historical medical libraries, as we were asked to do for this panel, I just want to start by giving some big picture context about the state of AI in libraries. So there's a ton of studies on this, and this is a sampling on this board here. But according to the recent International Pulse of the Library report, 2024 marks the transition of AI from hype to early adoption. This international survey of over 1,500 respondents revealed over 60% of libraries were evaluating or planning for some level of AI integration, and we heard Polina talking about that at her institution. The Association of Research Libraries conducted polls in April of 2023 and December of 2023, and they were able to track a quickly changing AI landscape amongst librarians who were becoming increasingly warm to this new technology. The Institute for Museum and Library Studies has funded the project Responsible AI in Libraries and Archives and provided the resources for libraries interested in experimenting with these new technologies, but also encouraging them to engage critically with the new software and chart an ethical course forward, and that is covered in this Journal of E-Science Librarianship. Finally, vendors of major subscription-based digital resources like ProQuest and Web of Science are racing to produce AI-powered research assistants that will quickly scan your documents and determine if they're relevant to the scholar. This is all to say that AI isn't a choice anymore. It's here and it's about to impact our work. The good news, however, is that librarians are well positioned to navigate this shift. In fact, every one of these studies I mentioned concludes by reinforcing the value of librarians and libraries in the age of AI. Every profession has to change with the times to remain relevant, and librarianship is no different. Librarians used to have handwrite or use typewriters to add names to a card and laminate them when you used to get your library card before they point you to a physical card catalog. When computers and their online database catalogs became available in the 1990s, many of the oldest libraries feared that they could never migrate their paper records online. Most did. Then search engines like Google came along, and libraries were threatened that the internet would put an end to libraries. It didn't. Libraries today may look different from when I was a child in the 1980s, but countless studies have reinforced their enduring value, both in public and academic spaces. Today, we are in the beginning years of another major technological transition. And while I have found several national and international studies affirming the importance of libraries in the age of AI, I'll note that I haven't found one specific to special collections libraries, independent research libraries, or historical medical libraries more specifically, which is most of those of us here in this room. Most studies suggest that leading library innovations are taking place in academic libraries, while public libraries are more cautious. The top two barriers that librarians have identified as preventing them from experimenting with AI was not a concern for misinformation or resistance to change, but rather, number one, budget, and number two, lack of experience. While historical medical libraries were not specifically called out, I would suspect many of my colleagues would agree with this assessment. But at this early stage, I also would argue that in a small institution like our own and like NIAM, it's perfectly acceptable for us to watch from the sidelines right now. I might even say it's fiscally responsible and strategic to do so. Let's recall when digitization was increasingly adopted across libraries in the early 2000s, many special collections libraries like my own were slow to adopt the trend for the same reasons as now, budget and lack of experience. But the benefit of waiting was that costs eventually came down, more products were available, communities of practitioners collaborated with each other, and there was no legacy data set that needed to be migrated from one catalog to the next. With our smaller teams and our specialist collections, historical medical libraries maintained our mission to preserve and provide access to the rich history of our field. With limited resources, it was hard to instill those in a new digital project that might fail when we were surrounded by more immediate challenges like going back to getting the boxes off the floor, aging HVAC systems, all those issues. So while I'm not recommending that our tiny sector of historical medical libraries does the R&D necessary to be early adopters of AI technology, I do think we have a responsibility to be kept abreast of how technological developments are changing research patterns so that we can work with and educate our patrons. With this cautious prelude, I will turn to three existing roles in libraries and suggest some new responsibilities that might emerge for them. There we are. So, number one is the reference librarian. As you all know, librarians are trained in information retrieval practices as part of their master's in library and information science degrees. An AI hallucination might at first appear alarming, but let's remember that librarians know where to find answers and how to quickly fact-check for accuracy. Indeed, AI bots are not the only ones who create false information. Librarians and archivists have long helped patrons who have incomplete or incorrect citations. That can happen from faulty note-taking or by reproducing an error that another scholar introduced into the canon. AI hallucinations can feel strangely unsettling, but librarians are among the best professionals positioned to help educate others when they spot a hallucination. And that is our reference librarian, Ashley Augustiniak, who did spot the AI hallucination and has been quickly getting caught up to speed with this. So in my library, you'll see that many of our patrons actually live in other states or countries, but they email us with reference requests when related to the history of chemistry, because they know we are in the best position to answer that question. Over the past 4 years, prompted first by COVID, we shifted the way we report our impact to the board. We used to only count the number of people who walked into the reading room, but of course that stopped during COVID. And it really no longer reflects the type of work that we're doing as librarians. In addition to counting the physical bodies that walk in the room, we also count the number of remote reference requests we get, which is increasing. It's 4 times the actual people that are in the reading room. And these come in through a centralized web form, from personal emails, from interactions with our digital collections or social media. And by analyzing the library data, it has reinforced what national studies show, which is that the act of digitizing materials and putting them online has led to more awareness and use of our collections. My opening example shows that whether it's remote or in person, the digital age is leading patrons back to historical libraries. We proudly occupy a niche space within the wider library ecosystem. We maintain strict collections development policies that ensure we collect as comprehensively as possible on specific topics of high relevance to the history of our discipline, be that medicine or science. Independent research libraries like my own, or like the New York Academy of Medicine, are known for their extensive collections on a specialist subject, their knowledgeable collection staff, and their fast response time due to keeping their collections on site. Further, a 2023 study conducted with over 1,000 American parents of school-age children ranked librarians among the top 5 most trusted professions, alongside doctors, nurses, and teachers. These groups ranked far above other professionals that included journalists, lawyers, and religious leaders. So, who better to fact-check in the age of rampant misinformation than a trusted librarian? My second role is the instructional librarian, and some of these titles may have different titles at other institutions. But what I want to talk about is that librarians in all sectors have long played an instructional role in teaching the capabilities and limitations of new technologies. It's a chance for critical thinking. Whether you're on a university hosting a class of undergraduates, or you're in an urban public library offering computer literacy workshops, it's part of the librarian's role. Once AI technology matures to the point where we feel cautiously optimistic about its potential, we should familiarize ourselves with its strengths and weaknesses and educate researchers. Like any good researcher knows, a citation reference, whether it is a footnote, a Google Scholar search result, or an AI-generated script, should be followed up by locating and reading the original text to ensure accuracy. In the future, we may see more library communities working together to empower each other. 10 years ago, at the dawn of the digital humanities, national groups like That Camp, which was the Humanities and Technology Camp, and regional groups like Philly DH, which was the Philly Digital Humanities scene. I'm looking at Adrienne, I don't know if you're at these with me. But we used to hold workshops in Philadelphia and boot camps, and these were across the country, but my library engaged as well. These groups were places where we all got together and taught each other new technologies, tried to figure out how they were relevant to our collections. And then they disbanded after a time, once attendees became familiar enough with the emerging technologies to know which ones were actually relevant to their work and which ones could be ignored. And that's where I'll bring to my final one, which is the digital librarian, which might be called a digital archivist, a digital curator in other places. But this person's job responsibility can change drastically, but most of us have at least one person with digital in their title, if not a whole team. Digital librarians have usually been tasked with digitizing collections, but they also explore software and open source software possibilities. They map metadata schemas from one database to another, and it is reasonable to suspect that this group will be tasked with analyzing new AI capabilities and determining which one is right for their library. At the moment, AI seems to offer endless potential, but each library should choose their priority based on their unique mission and the specific target audience that they serve. For example, the Pulse of the Library report of 2024 shows that academic and public libraries use almost opposite criteria for evaluating AI usefulness. Among academic libraries, they sought, number 1, supporting student learning, and number 2, supporting research excellence. Public libraries, on the other hand, rank student learning and research excellence among the lowest areas of impact, with number 1, content discovery, and number 2, resource accessibility as their top priorities. And this, I think, goes back to some of the stuff Trevor was saying too about you can't serve everyone. So really figure out who's your target audience and how do you best serve them. Libraries are exploring AI in everything from streamlining their own workflows to improving interactivity with the collections. But in such a vast field, some prioritization is necessary. So at this early implementation stage, it may be good for us to ask some mission-critical questions that can help guide our institutions. At the Science History Institute, we are forming an interdisciplinary collections-based brainstorm around these questions, and this involves folks in our oral history, our rare books, our museum artifacts, our archives, as well as some folks from the digital library collections and IT and fellows who use our collections. And some of the brainstorming, it's very early days, but we're starting to ask questions like this. What are the strengths and limitations of my collection? That is very different. The rare book curator answers that very differently from the oral historian. Who could best benefit from accessing the information in these texts? How can I help them do that? And where can I find like-minded partners? With an increased emphasis on building large language models to answer questions, it is necessary to consider realistic use cases for what a historical medical collection might best be positioned to answer. For example, I wrote my doctoral thesis on a 17th century medical practitioner. I can tell you, you don't want to seek treatment advice from her, or from the huge corpus of early modern pharmacological texts that I used. But such historic texts, and I'll add, such historic texts can also reinforce harmful stereotypes and biases against women and people of various nationalities. But because we know our collections, we will be the best able to guide how to make best use of them. So, for example, we have long hoped to produce a prosopographic study across our collections, which is a network analysis that can link multiple texts and users together. We have questions about network connections, how knowledge is created, and how it's circulated around the world. This hasn't been possible before due to the large amount of human labor hours that were required to produce a reliable data set. But some new AI technologies show great promise for reading and digesting massive amounts of data across multiple sets. So to conclude, much of this is still speculation, and only time will tell what branch of AI will prove most useful to the future of historical medical libraries. But I encourage us not to be short-sighted in our analysis. In December of 2013, as Melissa mentioned, many of us gathered at the College of Physicians of Philadelphia to discuss emerging roles for historical medical libraries in the digital age. And on the left, right, it's on my, the RBM journal there is the output that came out of it that I edited with Jeff Resnick. It's open access. But I will note that as we look ahead and talk, at this time, what we were discussing was navigating the age of mass digitization. I'll say, we never mentioned artificial intelligence. I don't think AI came up once. It just wasn't on our radars yet. And if you go through this, no one will talk about AI either. We couldn't have predicted this is where we would be only 1 decade later. So if 10 years ago we had deaccessioned the first books that we digitized, we would have been in trouble when new technologies required a higher pixel count to read those images. And if 10 years ago we had deaccessioned or moved all of our books off-site when it seemed less people were physically coming into our reading room to access them, we would not have been the go-to library for reference checks during the COVID-19 pandemic, nor the current go-to library for quick fact-checking for AI hallucinations. So we might disagree on the exact role that libraries will play in the future, but every study I have read is united in one point. Libraries will still be here. And as we look ahead, we will need to invest in new infrastructures to make them remain relevant in the future. Remember, libraries that oversee large collections on a specific topic are best positioned for creating some of the most authoritative data sets used by large language models. So it's not a question of physical or digital, it's both, and this is our time. Thank you.
Does that work? No.
I think they're working.
Is that work? Oh, it is working. Thanks, Polina. Michelle. So I wonder, after hearing your presentations, Polina, you mentioned that one of the roles we have today in, I'm going to say in all science libraries, so I can get in on it, is to make our collections AI ready. So could you talk a little more about that maybe? And also about, what tools libraries need to employ to keep our collections in the mix?
Yeah, absolutely. So what we are looking for is making our collections not only AI ready, but computationally actionable. So not just focusing on AI, however, that's the question, but kind of in general, making them computationally ready. And what I mean by that is, yes, with digitized materials, we have millions of pages, but now we have to help our researchers to, by extracting the data, the text from these digitized materials and assembling them as data sets that will be publicly accessible in open access. And then also educating, having tools and guidance with digital health humanities approaches. And there are many more tools than we had 10 years ago. Michelle mentioned at that camps. Now we have Jupyter notebooks that can be used working with these data sets. So I don't want us to leave that, that role to tech companies that will be monetizing on the materials that we have and already requesting and maybe using our digitized collections without our knowledge. So I want us to lead here instead of following the tech sector.
Maybe we can license some of that data to the tech companies. We're always looking for funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Or working with them, together with them, so we can actually benefit from the work they are doing.
I mean, I think a lot of what's come out of the digital age is leaning into open access infrastructures, and the way that's come about is large federal funding actually is one of the, I mean, I'm looking at Jeff, I know that NLM's been mentioned several times so far, but also IMLS and NEH, a lot of Sloan, there's different foundations that have supported the creation of databases that we've all contributed to, and I think once this technology gets a little further along, my hope is that we can contribute to an open access model.
Thank you.
As well. Oh, so go on.
We have an online question. Can you speak to the challenges of engaging patient communities when so often our institutions have earned their distrust through past exploitations for research rather than viewing and trusting them as collaborators?
Yeah, that's definitely a question that's always on my mind, and that's why we are partnering on that project with 5 community-based organizations and communities representing patients on co-designing an archive. And we are looking at different models. I know Trevor mentioned a model of the fully digital archive, which is actually run by a community. So we are presenting different models of archives, and then communities will be able to decide how they want to proceed with archiving their histories. Would it be managed by us, or do they still want to keep it within the community and manage that? So we just got that funding in July and had our first meeting with community members a couple of weeks ago. So I'll keep you all informed how it all develops, and at the end we will publish a white paper on best practices to co-designing together with communities.
Thanks, Polina. Are there questions from the floor? I have another online question for Michelle. How responsive, or maybe what was the reaction of your board to the idea of the value or importance of virtual users versus the in-person ones?
I would say very receptive, and I'll add that it's not one or the other. So we have really invested in our research community as well. We have about 20 fellows in residence every year. We're also working with the Consortium for the History of Science. I know you'll hear from Babak later, but they've also moved into our space at the Science History Institute. So we have a very strong in-person community of fellows as well, that they're on the third floor. They interact with the library staff at the coffee machines. We have writing groups. But most people are emailing us these days, and especially, we mentioned legacy collections and people working in these major societies. ACS, the American Chemical Society, is massive at this point, and their users are all around the country, but really the world. And so they know we're a repository, they email us, they're communicating with us, and I think my board sees that as a very positive thing, actually, that we're in the digital space and we're not requiring people to walk in.
Yeah, and I can attest that we had similar shift due to pandemic, and also we have a huge collection move happening right now, and I would like to thank all of my colleagues working now at UCSF with that move. It's moving 25,000 books from one floor to another, from the fifth to the first, but it's a huge move. So I'm really thankful to my team. Yes, it's been a shift to mostly digital references, and at a huge level of 900 or 1,200 a year.
If there are no more questions from the audience, I wonder, oh, I'm sorry, there is. Would you?
Sometimes it's better to wait instead of being an early adopter when it comes to technology. And really, I wonder, are there any risks, when you wait, when you're not leading, on the technology?
The question, if people didn't hear, is there a risk to wait to adopt a new technology? I would say, I guess it depends how long you wait, right? I think we're currently in year one. Everyone's saying it's the brink, it's the first, it's the move from reality to, or from a hypothetical to a reality. I don't want to be that early, right? So I am going to wait a little bit. But once we've, I think our digital collections, we waited until some of the technology was more mature, prices came down, and we got involved, and that served us very well. But then I don't want to be that organization that says I never digitized anything, because that would put me behind the curve at that point. So it's very much keeping an eye on how things are developing and knowing what's right for your library and your collection. The only way we have started experimenting internally with AI is actually with our oral history collection. Sonics is a transcription software that we're using now that is AI technology. It's gotten to the point where it is robust enough that we trusted it. We did some samples, and we realized it was extremely time-consuming, or it's very cost-effective to work with them, because we were paying for transcriptions. It was a manual process, and now it generates the first go, and then we absolutely go line by line and check it to make sure it's correct still. But it's been a huge time saver and cost saver. So I think once you can see those benefits, it's time to jump on board. But I don't think you have to be the first.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, and I think it depends if you have some support from your institution. That's why I was mentioning leveraging technology that's developed at your institution with the Versa, chat, for example, that has been developed at UCSF. I feel secure using the prompts and the data, submitting the data that I wouldn't do with OpenAI, ChatGPT.
Just on another area, I'm a neurosurgeon, and I work with virtual reality and artificial intelligence. And you can now basically take any type of surgical operation. You can feel the operation. You can actually have the bleeding. You can do all that. It's just what we do now. And you can actually train people to do that in a virtual reality, virtual operative assistants and things that we're developing now. to me, there doesn't seem to be any reason, if we can do that, that you can't have a virtual reality book and feel you move each of the pages, just like we do in neurosurgery. All the feelings can be the same. You can see it. You can use the microscope up and down, just like you should be able to do. So in a way, I don't understand where the library system hasn't developed these types of technologies, because they're available. They're available to us on a daily basis. And we teach people that way. So I'm just wondering, where are you in the virtual reality world?
Yeah, and one of the images I used in my presentation was from the murals by Bernard Zackheim about medicine in California. They were done in 1930s, but due to some construction project, that building had to go to be demolished. So the murals themselves have been removed and are preserved for future use. But what we did, we created a virtual reality exhibit where you can wear the Oculus or any other headset, and you're actually immersed into the that virtual exhibit, exploring the murals and the history of medicine in California in early 20th century. So we are experimenting for sure. And AI, generative AI is basically all around us. Then using, creating PowerPoint that I was presenting, I used design feature in PowerPoint, and it is, powered by AI. So we are experimenting, but maybe not at the same scale as in medicine. And in my institution at UCSF, we definitely, on a medical and pharmacy and education, they are on the forefront of using AI and teaching and in healthcare. So we're kind of following in the footsteps.
I'll maybe add that just because you can do it doesn't mean you should. And we did digitize, we had rare books digitized. We had what was called, I think we called it, I forget what it was, but it looked like a rare book. And you could
Turning
flip
the pages.
Thank you. And you can flip through it. And we have this digitally. We've looked at, there's various AI technologies that you can use as well with headsets. No, there's nothing really like holding that rare book in your hands. We still get, that is the biggest question we get is, I want to see something in the 15th century, and people gasp when they see it. You can't get that if you're wearing a headset. So I think we could put our time and money into that, but that's not what users are asking us for. We have talked about, what Paulina was saying, maybe creating an immersive experience. We've talked about the alchemical laboratory. We have a bunch of paintings where you can walk into the space and maybe see what was it like to be a scientist that was working on chemistry and using your pelican in the 17th century. That's the kind of thing I think AI can help us with. I do hear requests for that. I've just never heard anyone say, I'd rather flip through a digital book than see the physical one. It's like we could do it, but it's with limited resources, I think, identify what your users want and lean into that.
The majority of our users are interested in the content. It's a small proportion of them that are more interested in the physicality of the book. And don't forget, those who get to experience that also get to smell those old books too.
Actually, that's what I was going to comment on. A couple of decades ago, the National Library of Medicine, working with the British Library, did a project called Turning the Pages. And it had the sight, it had the sound, it didn't have the smell. Okay. The most difficult thing we ran into with that project was the rustling sound of the pages, because it had to be adjusted to the room the unit was in. It was too loud in some places and too soft in others. And the problem at that point, and again, this is a couple of decades ago, was that so much memory was being used by the animation of the page turning and the sound that it simply wasn't efficient, and much more practical ways of putting the text in front, such as the Medical Heritage Library, projects of that sort, turned out to be a better way of giving the information. And I am a rare book librarian who dealt with physical books, and the history of physical books was my field. And it's not the same. There's the text and there's the book. And you can digitize the text you can't really digitize the book, not the feel, not the colors, not the actual item in your hand. And what we're all doing, and I know these folks, if their institutions are doing it, is figuring out what you as a patron needs at this moment. Do you need the text? Do you need to hold the book in your hand?
I'll just tell you, you can. You should be able to feel the book move. You should be able to feel the page of the book move. It should be just like a normal book.
I have only one word to say, funding.
Because we've done it. We've done it in the world. So it doesn't mean it can't be done. I agree.
You want to lend us some money?
Thank you very much. We'll think about that. Most of us are trying to work on both ends with getting ready for tomorrow, but also getting the boxes off the floor today. Thank you very much for that.
Thank you.